Maria had always been the kind of person who noticed things. Small things. Things that others would walk right past without a second thought. Maybe it came from years of cleaning other people's spaces, moving quietly through their lives like a shadow. Or maybe it was just how she was raised. Her grandmother always told her to keep her eyes open and her mouth shut. But today, keeping her mouth shut felt impossible. The elevator hummed as it carried her up to the 40th floor of the gleaming downtown tower. She clutched her cleaning supplies a little tighter than usual. 3 years she'd been coming to this same office, cleaning the same marble floors, dusting the same expensive furniture. 3 years of watching James Morrison build his technology empire from behind the scenes. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into the familiar world of glass walls and city views that stretched for miles. The Morrison Industries logo gleamed on the wall in polished steel letters. This place always made her feel small, but not in a bad way. It reminded her that there were bigger things happening in the world, bigger dreams than her own little apartment. Across town, James was already at his desk, fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. Even from across the room, she could see the tension in his shoulders. He'd been working later and later these past few months, sometimes still there when she arrived at 6 in the morning. His dark hair was messier than usual, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison," she called out softly as she always did. He looked up and gave her that tired smile she'd grown used to. "Morning, Maria. Coffee's fresh if you want some." That was James for you. 3 years, and he still offered her coffee every morning. Not many bosses would even remember their cleaning lady's name, let alone offer to share their expensive coffee. It was one of the reasons she'd grown to genuinely care about this man who worked too hard and trusted too easily. She started with the outer offices first, working her way toward his private space. That's when she heard the voice that made her stomach clench. Catherine Morrison's laugh drifted through the partially open door of the conference room. It wasn't the warm laugh Maria remembered from the early days. This one was different, sharper, colder. Maria had watched James and Catherine together many times over the years. She'd seen the way they used to look at each other during those late dinners in his office, the gentle touches, the shared jokes. But something had shifted recently. Catherine's visits had become more frequent, but also more businesslike. Less love, more calculation. "David, everything is set for next week," Catherine was saying into her phone. Maria froze, her hand gripping the handle of her vacuum cleaner. She knew she shouldn't listen, but something in Catherine's tone made her feet refuse to move. "The resort has been booked under a different name, just like we discussed. James thinks it's a romantic surprise." There was a pause, then that cold laugh again. "He has no idea what's really waiting for him there." Maria's heart started beating faster. This didn't sound right. This didn't sound like a wife talking about a vacation with her husband. Once we're there and he's, taken care of, the transfer can happen immediately. With him gone, I inherit everything, and then we can move the money exactly like we planned. The vacuum cleaner slipped from Maria's suddenly sweaty hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Catherine's voice stopped immediately. Maria held her breath, pretending to struggle with the cord. "I have to go," Catherine whispered into the phone. "We'll talk tonight." Maria forced herself to keep working, her mind racing. Taken care of. Transfer. Inherit everything. The words kept spinning in her head like a broken record. She'd watched enough crime shows to know what those words meant when they were put together like that. For the next hour, she moved through her routine like a robot. Dust the shelves, empty the trash, clean the windows. But her thoughts were anywhere but on her work. She kept replaying Catherine's words, hoping she'd misunderstood something, hoping there was an innocent explanation. But deep in her gut, she knew there wasn't. When she finally made it to James's office, he was packing his briefcase. His expensive watch caught the morning light as he moved around his desk, gathering papers. "Heading out early today?" she asked, trying to keep her voice normal. "Actually, yes. Catherine surprised me with a trip to the Maldives. We leave tomorrow morning." His face lit up in a way she hadn't seen in months. "She said we need some time. Away from everything. Just the two of us." Maria felt like ice water had been poured down her back. Tomorrow morning. Catherine's phone call suddenly made terrible sense. The timing, the secrecy, the way she'd talked about him being taken care of. She watched James fold his favorite blue tie and place it carefully in his briefcase. This man who remembered her birthday every year, who'd helped her son get into college, who treated everyone in the building with respect regardless of their job title. The idea of something happening to him made her chest feel tight. "Mr. Morrison," she started, then stopped. "How do you tell someone their wife might be planning to hurt them? How do you say something like that without sounding crazy?" He looked up at her, eyebrows raised. "Everything okay, Maria?" She took a deep breath. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "Keep your mouth shut." But her heart was screaming something different. Some things were more important than keeping quiet. "Sir, I need to tell you something, and I hope you won't think I'm crazy or trying to cause trouble." James stopped packing and gave her his full attention. That was another thing she appreciated about him. When someone was talking to him, really talking, he listened. "I was cleaning the conference room earlier and I couldn't help but overhear Mrs. Morrison on the phone." The words felt heavy coming out of her mouth. "She was talking to someone named David about your trip tomorrow." James's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. "She mentioned something about a transfer, and about you being taken care of. And then she laughed when she said you had no idea what was waiting for you." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. James set down his briefcase and studied her face carefully. "Maria, that's a very serious thing to say about my wife." "I know, sir. And I wouldn't say it if I wasn't worried about you. In 3 years, have I ever caused drama or spread gossip?" He shook his head slowly. "No, you haven't. I've seen how much you care about people, how good you are to everyone. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I misunderstood what I heard. But if there's even a chance that something bad is planned," she looked him straight in the eyes, "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't warn you." James was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city below. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, thoughtful. "David Chen." Catherine mentioned, "Someone named David?" "Yes, sir." Another long pause. "David Chen is my biggest business rival. He's been trying to buy out my company for 2 years." The pieces of the puzzle were clicking together in both their minds. Maria could see it in the way James's face had gone pale, the way his hands had unconsciously clenched into fists. "What should I do?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. "Maybe just be careful? Check things out before you go?" James nodded, slowly, then looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. "Thank you, Maria, for caring enough to speak up. That couldn't have been easy." As she gathered her cleaning supplies to leave, Maria hoped she'd done the right thing. Either way, she knew she wouldn't sleep well that night. James couldn't concentrate on anything after Maria left. Her words kept echoing in his mind like a broken song. He tried to tell himself it was impossible. Catherine was his wife of 8 years. They'd built a life together. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But the name David Chen kept bothering him. Why would Catherine be talking to his biggest competitor? And why would she hide it from him? He picked up his phone 3 times to call Catherine, then put it down each time. What was he supposed to say? "Hey, honey, the cleaning lady thinks you're planning to hurt me." It sounded crazy even in his own head. Instead, he called his head of security, Robert Kim. If anyone could help him figure this out quietly, it was Robert. "I need you to look into something for me," James said when Robert answered. "And I need it done fast and discreet." "What's going on, boss?" James hesitated. "I might be losing my mind, but I need you to check on Catherine's recent activities, phone records, credit card statements, anything you can find legally." "James, that's your wife we're talking about." "I know. Just, please, trust me on this." 1. Robert was quiet for a moment. "Okay, give me 2 hours." Those 2 hours felt like the longest of James's life. He tried to work, tried to review contracts, tried to do anything to keep his mind busy. But every few minutes he'd remember the way Maria had looked at him, the concern in her eyes, the fear. Maria had worked for him for 3 years. She'd never once gossiped about anyone. She'd never asked for anything beyond her regular pay. She'd even worked extra hours during his mother's funeral without asking for overtime. If Maria was worried enough to risk her job by speaking up, maybe he should be worried too. His phone buzzed. "Robert." "You're not going to like this," Robert said without even saying hello. James's stomach dropped. "What did you find?" "Catherine's been in contact with David Chen for the past 6 months. Multiple phone calls, text messages, even a few meetings at hotels downtown." The room suddenly felt too small. James loosened his tie, trying to breathe normally. "There's more," Robert continued. "She's been researching offshore bank accounts, specifically ones in the Maldives, and she's taken out a life insurance policy on you. A big one." "How big?" $50 million. She did it 3 months ago." James felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. $50 million. The same amount as his emergency fund that only Catherine knew about. The fund he'd set up in case the company ever faced a major crisis. "Robert, I need you to dig deeper. Find out everything about this trip to the Maldives, every detail." "Already on it. I'll call you back in an hour." James hung up and stared out his office window. The city looked the same as it had that morning, but everything felt different now, like he was seeing the world through someone else's eyes. His mind drifted back to the past few months. Catherine had been different, more distant. She'd stopped asking about his work, stopped joining him for their usual Sunday breakfasts. She'd been spending more time with friends but never wanted to talk about what they'd done, and the trip to the Maldives. She'd surprised him with it just last week, saying they needed to reconnect. She'd already booked everything, already made. All the arrangements, all he had to do was pack and show up. The phone rang again. "Robert." "James, sit down. I'm already sitting." "The resort Catherine booked isn't a regular resort. It's a private island that David Chen's company owns through a shell corporation. And get this, there's no record of you being registered as a guest. Only Catherine." James felt cold all over. "What does that mean?" "It means officially, you were never supposed to be there. If something happened to you on that island, there would be no paper trail showing you ever arrived. The pieces were falling into place like a horrible puzzle. The private island, the life insurance policy, the contact with David Chen, the fact that Catherine had insisted they take separate flights for the romantic surprise." "There's something else," Robert said. "I found recorded conversations between Catherine and Chen." "James, I'm sorry, but you need to hear this." "Play it." Catherine's voice came through the phone speaker, clear as day. "David, once James is out of the picture, I'll have access to everything. The company, the accounts, all of it. We just need to make sure it looks like an accident. David." Chen's voice responded. "The island is perfect, remote location, no witnesses, and my people will handle the cleanup. It'll look like he went swimming and never came back. And then I inherit everything as his widow. We can transfer the assets to your company and disappear together just like we planned." James had to put the phone down. He felt sick. Actually, physically sick. The woman he'd shared a bed with for 8 years, the woman he'd trusted with everything, was planning to have him killed. "James? You still there?" "Yeah," he managed to say. "There's more recordings. They've been planning this for months. Every detail, every backup plan. They even discussed what Catherine would say to the police when they found your body." James closed his eyes. "What do I do, Robert? First, you don't get on that plane tomorrow. Second, we call the police. This is conspiracy to commit murder." "Wait," James said. "If we call the police now, they might not have enough evidence to make charges stick. Chen is smart. He probably has lawyers who could get him out of this. So what are you suggesting?" James thought about Maria's warning, about how she'd risked everything to tell him the truth, about how close he'd come to walking into a trap that would have cost him his life. "I want to catch them in the act. I want to make sure they can't hurt anyone else ever again." "That's dangerous, James. Not if we do it right. Catherine thinks. I don't know anything. She thinks I'm going to walk onto that island like a lamb to slaughter. But what if I turn the tables on them? What do you have in mind?" James was already forming a plan. "How fast can you get federal agents involved?" With recordings like these? Pretty fast. Good, because I want Catherine and Chen to think their plan is working right up until the moment they realize it's not. He thought about calling Maria to thank her, but decided to wait. First, he wanted to make sure Catherine and Chen paid for what they'd planned to do. Then he'd figure out how to thank the woman who'd saved his life. That evening, James went home and acted like nothing had changed. He packed his bags, talked excitedly about their trip, even helped Catherine choose which dresses to bring. All while knowing that she was planning to make sure he never came home. It was the hardest performance of his life, but every time he looked at Catherine's smile, he remembered her voice on those recordings. The coldness in her tone when she talked about his death like it was just another business transaction. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, James Morrison went to bed next to his wife, knowing it would be the last time he'd ever trust her again. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as James watched Catherine pack her last few items. She hummed softly, to herself, the same tune she used to hum when they were first married, back when her smiles were real and her touch meant love instead of lies. "I'm so excited about this trip," she said, folding a red dress carefully into her suitcase. "It feels like forever since we've had time just for us." James nodded and managed to smile. "Me too, I really need this break." If only she knew how true that statement was. He needed a break from living with someone who wanted him dead. "I still think it's romantic that we're taking separate flights," Catherine continued, "meeting at the resort like we're secret lovers." She laughed that laugh again, the one that used to make his heart skip but now made his skin crawl. "Your idea was brilliant," James said. "I never would have thought of something so creative." Creative. That was one way to describe planning someone's murder. The plan Robert had helped him set up was simple but effective. Catherine would take her flight to the Maldives as scheduled. She'd arrive at David Chen's private island, expecting to find James there within hours. But James wouldn't be on his plane. Instead, he'd be waiting in their penthouse with federal agents, ready to watch Catherine and Chen celebrate what they thought was his death. "What time is your flight again?" James asked, though he knew the answer perfectly. 2:00. "Yours is at 4, right? So you'll get there just as I'm finishing dinner." She walked over and kissed his cheek. "I can't wait to see your face when you see the surprise I have planned." James had to use every ounce of self-control not to pull away from her touch. "I'm sure it'll be unforgettable." That was definitely true, just not in the way she thought. After Catherine left for the airport, James called Robert. "She's gone. Are your people in position?" "Everything's ready. We've got agents watching her flight, monitoring the island, and recording every communication between her and Chen. The federal prosecutor is standing by." "And the penthouse?" "Fully equipped. Cameras, recording devices, the works. When Catherine comes back thinking you're dead, we'll capture every word." James spent the rest of the day in his office trying to work, but mostly just staring at the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. He kept thinking about Maria's warning. If she hadn't spoken up, he'd be on a plane right now, flying toward his own death. Around 6:00, Robert called with an update. "Catherine just landed. Our agents watched her meet with Chen at the island resort. They looked pretty cozy. Any word on when they plan to?" "You know, according to the communications, we've been monitoring. They're expecting you to arrive around 8 their time. That's when they plan to stage the accident." James looked at his watch. In his wife's mind, he had about 2 hours left to live. The waiting was the hardest part. James sat in his penthouse, surrounded by federal agents who moved quietly around his home like ghosts. Agent Patricia Williams, the lead investigator, sat across from him at his kitchen table. "You sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. "We have enough evidence to arrest them now." "I want to hear them say it," James replied. "I want to hear my wife celebrate my death with my own ears. I need to know exactly who I was married to." Agent Williams nodded. "I understand. But this might be harder than you think. Hearing someone you loved talk about killing you, it changes something inside you." James had already felt that change starting. Every happy memory he had with Catherine was now poisoned. Every laugh, every kiss, every quiet moment they'd shared, all of it felt like a lie now. Around 10 o'clock that night, James's phone rang. Catherine, Agent Williams, gave him the thumbs up. The call was being recorded. "Hello?" James answered, trying to sound like he was on an airplane. "James? Honey, where are you? I'm at the resort and you're not here yet." The concern in her voice sounded so real. If he didn't know better, he'd think she was genuinely worried about him. "My flight got delayed," he lied. "Bad weather, I might not get there until tomorrow morning." There was a pause. Then Catherine's voice, a little sharper than before. "Tomorrow morning? But I had everything planned for tonight." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm as disappointed as you are." "No," Catherine said quietly. "I don't think you understand how disappointed I am." The line went dead. James looked at Agent Williams. "She's calling Chen now," Williams said, listening to something through her earpiece. "Our agents on the island can hear them talking." 15 minutes later, Williams got another update. "They're changing the plan. Catherine's flying back tonight. She'll be here by morning, and they're going to try a different approach." "What kind of different approach?" "Home invasion gone wrong. They figure if you never made it to the island, they'll make it look like someone broke into your penthouse and killed you during a robbery." James felt his blood turn cold. "When?" "They're thinking tomorrow night. Catherine will make sure she has an alibi while Chen's people handle the details." The next morning, Catherine walked into their penthouse looking tired but determined. James was sitting at the breakfast table reading the newspaper like it was any other day. "You're back early," he said, not looking up. "I missed you too much to stay," she replied, but her voice sounded different, strained. "Besides, the resort wasn't as nice as I expected." "That's too bad. Maybe we can try somewhere else next month." Catherine poured herself coffee and sat across from him. "James, I've been thinking, maybe we should update our security system. This neighborhood has been having more break-ins lately." There it was. She was already setting up the story. "You think so?" James asked. "Definitely. I'd hate for something to happen to you while I'm out with my sister tomorrow night." Her sister. The perfect alibi. James had to admit Catherine was thorough. The day passed slowly. Catherine made phone calls, went shopping, acted like a normal wife planning a normal evening, all while knowing that by this time tomorrow she expected to be a wealthy widow. That evening, as they sat watching television together, James studied his wife's face. She looked so calm, so peaceful. How does someone plan a murder and then sit next to their victim watching a comedy show? "Catherine," he said during a commercial break. "Yes?" "Do you ever regret anything about our marriage?" She looked at him with what seemed like genuine surprise. "What kind of question is that?" "I don't know. I've just been thinking about how much our lives have changed over the years." Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. "The only thing I regret is not appreciating what we had sooner." The irony was overwhelming. She was telling the truth, just not in the way she meant it. The next evening, Catherine kissed him goodbye before leaving for her sister's house. James watched from the window as she drove away, probably to meet David Chen and finalize the details of his murder. An hour later, Agent Williams got word that Chen's hired killers were on their way to the penthouse. "This is it," she told James. "You ready?" James nodded, though he wasn't sure anyone could really be ready for something like this. "Remember, stay in the safe room until we give the all clear. We'll handle everything else." As James waited in his hidden safe room listening to the agents prepare for Chen's people to arrive, he thought about Maria again. Tomorrow he'd make sure she knew that her courage had saved his life. But tonight, he was going to make sure Catherine and Chen paid for what they'd tried to do. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait for the killers to walk into it. The arrests had happened exactly as planned. David Chen's hired men walked straight into the federal trap, and within hours, both Chen and Catherine were in custody. The recordings, the evidence, the failed murder attempt, everything painted a clear picture of conspiracy and attempted murder. James had watched through a video feed as Catherine's face went from confident to confused to absolutely terrified when she realized her husband was still alive. But now, 3 days later, sitting in his quiet penthouse, James felt empty. The woman he'd loved and trusted for 8 years was gone. Not just physically gone, but the person he thought she was had never really existed at all. The Catherine he'd fallen in love with, the one who used to make him laugh and dream about their future together. That woman had been a mask hiding someone who could plan his death without losing a single night's sleep. His lawyer had called that morning with updates about the case. Catherine and Chen were both facing life sentences. The evidence was overwhelming, and their lawyers were already talking about plea deals. Justice would be served, but James found no satisfaction in it. He just felt tired and hollow. That's when he remembered Maria Santos, the cleaning lady who had risked her job to save his life. While he'd been drowning in the darkness of betrayal, he'd almost forgotten about the one bright spot in this whole mess. The person who had seen danger and chosen to speak up, even when staying quiet, would have been so much easier. James had been thinking about Maria a lot over the past few days. How scared she must have been to approach him with her concerns. How much courage it had taken to warn him about something so serious. She could have easily talked herself out of it, convinced herself it wasn't her business or worried about losing her job. But she hadn't. She'd chosen to do the right thing, and that choice had saved his life. James picked up his phone and called Robert Kim. "I need you to help me with something. Something important." "What do you need, boss?" "I want to do something special for Maria Santos. Something that shows her how grateful I am." "What did you have in mind?" James had been thinking about this since the night of the arrests. "I know she takes the bus to work every day. I've seen her waiting at the stop in the rain, carrying her cleaning supplies, sometimes with grocery bags. I want to give her a car." "That's generous, James." "It's not generous enough. This woman saved my life, Robert. If she hadn't spoken up, Catherine and Chen would have succeeded. I'd be dead, and they'd be splitting my company between them right now." "What kind of car were you thinking?" James thought about Maria's personality. Practical, humble, hard-working. She wouldn't want something flashy that would make her feel uncomfortable. Something reliable and safe. Maybe a nice sedan. Something her family can use too. He paused. "Actually, I want to know more about her situation, her family, her needs. I want to make sure I'm helping in the right way." Robert did his research quickly and thoroughly, just like always. By that evening, James had a complete picture of Maria's life that made his heart ache. Maria Santos was 42 years old and worked 3 different cleaning jobs to support her family. She cleaned his office building in the early mornings, then went to clean a medical office in the afternoons and sometimes picked up evening shifts cleaning retail stores. Her husband had been injured in a construction accident 2 years ago and couldn't work anymore. They had 3 children, 2 in high school and 1 in middle school. The family lived in a small apartment across town, and Maria's oldest daughter, Isabella, was incredibly smart. She wanted to study engineering, but was working part-time after school to help with family expenses instead of focusing on her studies. The middle child, Diego, played soccer and had real talent, but the family couldn't afford the travel team, fees that might get him noticed by scouts. The youngest, little Carmen, was only 12, but already talking about dropping out of school as soon as she turned 16 to help support the family. Reading about Maria's struggles made James realize something. The car was just the beginning of what he wanted to do. The next morning, James called the best car dealership in the city. "I need a car delivered to someone as a surprise, something special, but not too flashy." He chose a beautiful blue sedan, reliable, safe, with all the features Maria would need. Heated seats for cold mornings, a good sound system for her commute, excellent safety ratings for when she drove her kids around. He had them at a premium warranty that would cover everything for the next 5 years. But James wasn't done. He called his financial advisor. "I want to set up an education fund, full college tuition for 3 kids plus living expenses." "How much are we talking about?" "Whatever it takes. The best schools, no limits. And I want to set up a family trust too. Something that will give them security without making them feel like charity cases." Next, he called his company's HR director. "I want to create a new position, head of building safety and awareness, someone who understands how to see problems before they become disasters. What kind of background are you looking for?" Someone with excellent observation skills, good instincts about people, and the courage to speak up when something's wrong. I already have someone in mind. The morning of the car delivery, James positioned himself across the street from Maria's apartment building. He wanted to see her reaction himself. At exactly 7:30, just as Maria was leaving for work with her usual bag of cleaning supplies, a delivery truck pulled up. James watched as the truck driver approached Maria with a clipboard. He could see the confusion on her face as the man pointed to the beautiful blue car being unloaded. Maria shook her head, clearly thinking there had been some mistake. Then the driver handed her an envelope. James had spent an hour writing that letter, trying to find the right words to express what Maria's warning had meant to him. He'd told her about Catherine's plan, about how the investigation had unfolded, about how her courage had literally saved his life. He'd tried to explain that the car wasn't payment for what she'd done. You couldn't put a price on someone's life, but rather a small token of his gratitude. From across the street, James watched Maria read the letter. He saw her hand go to her mouth, saw her look around as if she couldn't believe what was happening. The delivery driver was explaining something, probably about the car title and registration that were already in her name. Then Maria started crying, not the quiet tears of someone who was sad, but the overwhelming sobs of someone whose life had just completely changed. James felt his own eyes getting watery as he watched her family come downstairs to see what was happening. Her husband, moving slowly because of his injuries, read the letter over her shoulder. Her 3 kids gathered around the car, touching it like they were afraid it might disappear. Little Carmen climbed into the driver's seat and pretended to drive while her siblings laughed, but the best part was watching Maria herself. She walked around the car slowly, running her hands along the paint, checking the tires, opening and closing the doors. This wasn't just a car to her, it was freedom. No more waiting in the rain for buses that were always late. No more carrying heavy cleaning supplies on public transportation. No more worrying about how to get her kids to doctor's appointments or school events. James's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but he knew who it had to be. Mr. Morrison, I don't know what to say. This is too much. Thank you for believing me. And thank you for this incredible gift. I will never forget your kindness. Maria. James smiled as he typed back. Thank you for having the courage to speak up. This is just the beginning. Because it was just the beginning. Tomorrow he would call Maria and offer her the new position at his company. A job that paid 3 times what she was making now, with full benefits for her whole family, and the respect she deserved for her intelligence and integrity. James Morrison had learned something important from this whole experience. Sometimes, the most important people in your life aren't the ones with fancy titles or expensive clothes. Sometimes they're the ones who clean your office every morning and have the courage to save your life when it matters most. As he watched Maria's family celebrate their unexpected blessing, James felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not just hope for his own future, but hope that there were still good people in the world. People like Maria, who chose to do right even when it was scary. The woman who had started as his cleaning lady had become his hero. And James Morrison never forgot his heroes. 6 months had passed since that life-changing morning when Maria found a car waiting outside her apartment. 6 months since her world had completely transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Maria adjusted her blazer as she walked through the glass doors of Morrison Industries. It still felt surreal sometimes, wearing business clothes instead of her old cleaning uniform. But what felt even more surreal was the way people treated her now. Employees who had walked past her for years without a glance now stopped to ask her opinion on security matters. Her office was on the 35th floor with windows that looked out over the city. Every morning when she sat at her desk, she remembered the view from down below, the bus stops, the crowded sidewalks, the world she used to navigate with heavy bags and tired feet. Now she saw that same world from a different angle, and it reminded her never to forget where she came from. "Good morning, Maria," called out Jennifer from accounting as she passed by. "How's the new safety protocol working out?" "Really well," Maria replied. We've already prevented 2 potential problems just this week. That was the truth. In her new role as head of building safety and awareness, Maria had discovered she had a talent for spotting trouble before it became real trouble. Last month, she'd noticed that one of the night security guards had been acting strange, taking longer breaks, avoiding certain floors, looking nervous around the other staff. Her investigation revealed he'd been passing building information to a competitor. The tier. Week before that, she'd picked up on tension between 2 department heads that was affecting their entire teams. Instead of letting it escalate into a major conflict, she'd suggested a mediation session that resolved the issue before it could damage the company. James had been right when he created this position for her. Years of observing people, of moving quietly through their spaces and noticing the small details others missed, had prepared her perfectly for this work. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter, Isabella. "Mom, just got my MIT acceptance letter. Full scholarship confirmed." Maria smiled, remembering how worried she used to be about Isabella's future. Her brilliant oldest daughter had been working after school at a grocery store, trying to help with family expenses instead of focusing on her studies. Now Isabella was headed to one of the best engineering schools in the country, with every expense covered by the education fund James had established. Diego's text came next. "Coach says the scout from State University wants to meet with me next week." Her middle son's soccer talent was finally getting the recognition it deserved. The travel team fees that used to be impossible for their family were no longer a concern. Diego was thriving, and college coaches were starting to notice. Even little Carmen was doing better. At 13, she'd gone from talking about dropping out of school to dreaming about becoming a doctor. The family's financial stress had lifted, and with it, the pressure on the children to sacrifice their futures for immediate survival. Maria's husband, Luis, was doing better too. With proper medical care now available through Maria's excellent health insurance, his back injury was improving. He'd even started talking about taking some business classes, maybe starting a small home repair service when he was fully healed. The family had moved to a larger apartment in a safer neighborhood. Maria still drove the blue sedan James had given her, and every time she started the engine she felt grateful. Not just for the car itself, but for what it represented, the moment. Her life had changed because she'd found the courage to speak up. A knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." James Morrison stepped into her office looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in months. The stress lines around his eyes had softened, and he seemed to have found some peace after the nightmare with Catherine and David Chen. "How are things going, Maria?" "Better than I ever imagined," she said honestly. "I got some good news for my kids this morning." "Isabella's MIT acceptance?" Maria looked surprised. "How did you know?" James smiled. "I might have put in a good word with someone I know there, though honestly she didn't need my help. Her grades and test scores spoke for themselves." "James, you've already done so much for us. I haven't done nearly enough. You saved my life." "Maria, there's no amount of gratitude that could ever match that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had evolved from employer and employee to something more like friendship. James had learned to value Maria's insights on everything from business decisions to personal matters. And Maria had learned that beneath James's wealth and success was a genuinely good person who cared about treating people right. "I wanted to tell you something," James said. "The foundation I started, the Santos Foundation for Working Families, it's really taking off." Maria still got emotional when she heard the name. James had named his new charitable foundation after her family, focusing on helping working-class families whose breadwinners showed exceptional courage or character. The foundation provided education funding, emergency assistance, and career development opportunities. "How many families are we helping now?" she asked. 57 families across the country. And we're just getting started. The foundation had become Maria's passion project outside of her regular job. She helped identify families who deserved assistance, worked with local organizations to verify needs, and followed up to make sure the help was making a real difference. It felt good to use her new position to lift up other families who were struggling the way hers had struggled. "There's something else," James continued. I've been thinking about expanding your role here at the company. What do you mean? I want to create a new department, corporate culture and ethics. I want you to head it up. Maria felt her heart skip. James, I don't have a business degree or experience managing a department. You have something more valuable than either of those things. You have integrity, good judgment, and the courage to speak truth to power. Those aren't things you can learn in business school. Maria thought about how far she'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans, invisible to most of the people who worked in this building. Now, James was offering her a chance to shape the culture of the entire company. What would this new department do? Make sure that what happened with Catherine and Chen never happens again. Not just the criminal stuff, but the culture that allowed it to happen. I was so focused on profits and growth that I stopped paying attention to the people around me. I want someone to make sure this company stays true to its values. And you think I'm the right person for that? I know you are. You proved it when you warned me about Catherine. You could have stayed quiet, kept your head down, played it safe, but you didn't. You chose to do what was right even when it was scary. Maria looked out her office window at the city below. Somewhere down there, other people were facing the same kinds of choices she'd faced 6 months ago. The choice between staying safe and doing what's right. The choice between minding your own business and speaking up for someone who might be in danger. I'll do it, she said. But I want to add something to the program. What's that? I want to create a system where everyone in the company, from the CEO to the newest janitor, knows their voice matters. I want people to feel safe speaking up when they see something wrong. James nodded. I love it. What would you call it? Maria thought for a moment. The Courage Initiative. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is find the courage to speak up. A year later, Maria stood in the same conference room where she'd first overheard Catherine's deadly plans, but now she was presenting the annual Courage Initiative report to the company's board of directors. The program had prevented 3 major ethical violations, resolved dozens of workplace conflicts, and created a culture where employees felt valued and heard. Isabella was thriving at MIT, studying mechanical engineering and already talking about internships at top technology companies. Diego had received a full soccer scholarship to State University. Carmen was in honors classes and volunteering at the local hospital, working toward her dream of becoming a doctor. Luis had fully recovered from his injury and started his home repair business. It was small but growing, and he took pride in being able to contribute to the family's success again. As for James, he'd learned to trust his instincts about people again. He'd started dating someone new, a teacher he'd met through the Santos Foundation who shared his values and treated him like a person rather than a bank account. But most importantly, James had learned to listen to the people who cleaned his offices, who delivered his mail, who worked in every corner of his company. Because he'd learned that wisdom doesn't always come from boardrooms and business schools. Sometimes it comes from a cleaning lady who cares enough to warn you that your life is in danger. The cleaning lady who had saved his life had become so much more than that. She'd become a leader, a friend, and living proof that one moment of courage can change everything. And every morning when Maria drove to work in her blue sedan, past the bus stop where she used to wait in the rain, she remembered the lesson she'd learned. Your voice matters. Your courage counts, and you never know whose life you might save just by speaking up. The woman who had once been invisible had found her voice. And with that voice, she was changing the world, one conversation at a time.